Pilot to crew. Pilot to crew. Across the enemy coast. Keep your eyes open for fighters, guys. Gunners, look out. Keep your heads outside. Keep your scan up.
Formation leader to formation. Pull it in, fellas. Pull it in. Pull it in. Tighten it up. Tighten it up. We gotta have that mutual formation, fellas. If you don't tighten it up, we're gonna get chopped up.
Bombardier to pilot. Everything's working good, Skipper. The Norden really seems to be tuned up today. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll take over from there.
Waist gunner to pilot. Right waist gunner to pilot. We're on it, Skipper. We're looking.
Radio operator to pilot. The rest of the formation is checking in, Skipper. So far, we haven't lost any due to flak or fighters. Thompson said his number 3 is running away. They're gonna have to pull out and drop back.
As pilot, every time I heard my crew check in, talk about what was going on as we're heading into Germany, I couldn't help but worry about them and the other crews that were with us. Their responsibility was often more than I could really handle. After all, I was only 22 years old. Hearing the drone of the engines, looking around, feeling the sweat running down my back, even though it was less than 30 degrees below zero inside, never made me feel good. I really hated those flights over Germany.
Combat was nothing like what we had done in the States in training, attacking through clear blue skies with no enemy interference. At the target, we had people shooting at us, rockets coming at us, planes coming at us, and people hollering. It wasn't like in the movies, I'll tell you. They really screamed. We had one kid, a gunner, with a high, shrill voice. I can still remember him shouting excitedly over the interphone, "Pick him up, Paul, pick him up. Paul, get him, get him, get him, Paul." And other gunners would join in. He wanted to keep discipline over the interphone, but once the battle got going, it was almost impossible. The Bombardier operated the chin turret in the B-17. Sitting there, one felt terribly exposed. The nearest thing to it is the dream where you're walking down the road with no clothes on. That was what it felt like being there when the battle began. You knew that glass around you wasn't worth 10 cents for protection. The smallest round or fragment would go clean through it. The man at the front had the best view of what was going on, but he had to pay for it. We stole regular GI helmets, took them down to the base blacksmith shop, flipped a guy a 5-pound note, and he would hammer out the sides so that it would fit over our headgear. Also had my own special flak suit. I managed to get a spare section. Other guys rounded up manhole covers, which I placed under my rear end to protect the family jewels.
Each time we brought a B-17 home, there were mixed feelings among us. We were sure glad to be home, to be back. Especially if we had wounded or had been shot up or seen other guys go down. All of us had a confusing combination of emotions bouncing around inside. When you haven't finished your tour yet, and you set your plane down on English soil, you slow down, knowing that you've got to do it again. Another mission hanging over you, just like a very dark cloud. More flak, more fighters to face another day, very soon. Even frostbite was our enemy, flying at those altitudes, sometimes 50 degrees below zero inside. We had guys lose their fingers, lose their toes, even their feet. It was real bad, something to dread. But every time we got back, somehow we pushed the next mission out of our heads, and, well, we felt good about being home.
Though it was designed in the early 1930s, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress became America's premier heavy bomber during World War II and the nation's most famous military aircraft. After the war, General Carl Toohey Spotts said the B-17 was the single weapon most responsible for the defeat of Germany. However, due to U.S. isolationism before the war, the B-17 could not be sold as an offensive weapon. As a result, it was presented to Congress as a long-range weapon against enemy fleets for protection of American shores and overseas possessions. In other words, this marvel of engineering would be an extended form of coastal artillery. That kept the Boeing assembly lines open until the war, when peak Fortress production reached 16 per day in April 1944.
As aircraft commander, I always felt very responsible as I rode out on that Jeep. Every one of us knew that we were going up against some very tough opposition. We were young. We wanted very much to stay healthy. We methodically checked our shoes. It could be your best friend if your fort got shot up. Lots of tension this morning. If we can just get in and go about the business at hand, it helps to take your mind off the what-ifs. The tension always seems to dissipate a little once we get the engine started. I always feel a little guilty taking these guys with me on a mission. I don't really know why. It certainly isn't my choice. It's my duty to watch over them, and I have to do everything right just to bring them back in one piece. But every crew member feels pretty much the same way. Each position in a B-17 is important. After all, this is a crew airplane, and we have to do it right or we just won't make it. No time for personality problems or quarreling. We have to stick together and get along. If one guy can't hack it, he gets assigned somewhere else. There's no room in combat for anger and resentment. But my crew, well, we've been together since the beginning. Now's the time to check the oxygen and radio leads, making sure it all works before engines start. Learning your systems don't work at 20,000 feet, well, then it's too late. You want to make sure everything is set right before you take off for Germany. Crew coordination up front is crucial. Pilot and co-pilot are a team. It really does take two people to fly a B-17.
Hydraulic pump switch is checked. Fuel tank crossfeed.
The ball turret gunner is always the smallest fellow in the crew. Before we crank engines, he has to check all the motors and switches, then square himself away for the trip. Same for the top turret gunner. And the radio operator, he's our only line of communication on board or to other aircraft. He plugs in and checks everything to make sure the radios are in top shape. Call to the tower confirms radios 5x5. We need them to fly a tight formation and to get to the target and get back. 0700's here. Let's get this show on the road.
Once the pilots are seated, the B-17 cockpit is very roomy, and it's well laid out for a 1930s design. The panel itself starts with engine instruments and controls and fuel gauges on the co-pilot side. It works its way over, in the modern airplanes, to the radio stack, World War II, all the flying instruments were in the middle. Now we have them on both sides, so each pilot has a set. The throttles are probably the hallmark of the B-17. They're like large iron grates that sprout up out of the center console, and they're handled palm up. This is the way management's always been taught in the B-17. Propeller RPM levers are below the throttles and are usually handled by the engineer as well as the co-pilot. The manifold wastegates, the turbocharger wastegates, are handled here. It's an automatic box that controls the wastegates to give you a very specific set of manifold pressure readings on takeoff. The mixtures sit right here, and they're moved again by the co-pilot on the pilot's command. The cowl flap levers sit in the middle of the console along with a number of other switches. The flap switches here. It used to be in World War II that the control toggle for the landing gear was here as well, but it's electrical and it looks identical. Quite often you could flip the gear switch instead of the flap switch and the gear would retract inadvertently on the ground. Needless to say, it does a tremendous amount of damage to the airplane. So they moved it up here so that pilots wouldn't do that. Bomb bay door switches also up here now. Boost pumps for the engine are here, and the magnetos, the ignition control for the engine, sit here on this side for all 4 engines, with emergency on-off on the magnetos. Overall, the cockpit is very well laid out for a 1930s design. The pilot, co-pilot, and engineer have specific responsibilities assigned to them for the management of the aircraft. And between them, if you divide the responsibilities up, you can handle an emergency or any situation very quickly and usually very safely, since everybody has a certain job to do and they know what's expected of them. And also it gives you 3 different people in the cockpit to make decisions, even though in the end it's the aircraft commander's decision as to what finally is done as far as shutting down an engine or what emergency procedure to take. But a wonderful cockpit and certainly a nostalgic one to fly in. Strapping in with me today are National Warplane Museum President Austin Wadsworth and his son Craig. Austin, when you acquired this B-17 back in 1985, it was the first time it had come out of firebombing service. It must have been a tremendous commitment since the museum had no other aircraft other than the P-40. How did that come about?
Well, we know that the planes were going up for auction, and they had been for sale for a year or so, and we knew that we wanted a B-17. We knew that we needed one to become what we'd like to become, and it was just a question of raising the money and figuring out how we were going to do it.
And how did you do it?
We did it through the membership, as with so many things in the museum. A number of members, many members, pledged money over a 3-year period toward the retirement of the debt, and that's what made it financially possible to go and buy it.
Craig, what were your feelings when your dad came up with the idea of buying a World War II bomber? Were you apprehensive or excited, or what was it?
Well, after having watched 12 O'Clock High for when I was a child, I just thought it was wonderful. It was like a fulfillment of a dream to have one of these within arm's reach.
And now what's it like to be able to fly it?
Oh, even better. I mean, it's an honor to be able to do it, and it's a real piece of history. I enjoy it a lot.
It's a thrilling airplane. Let's strap it on and fly it.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Before starting engines, pre-flight.
Complete.
Fuel and oil.
Checked.
Flight forms and crew briefed.
Yes.
Doors and exits.
Closed.
On bay doors.
Clear and closed.
Fire extinguisher.
Set.
Cargo.
Secure.
Circuit breakers.
In.
Fuel tank cross feeds.
They're off and neutral.
Hydraulic pressure.
It looks like 800.
Okay, and hydraulic pump switch.
Is checked.
All right. Parking brakes coming up.
Okay.
Flight control.
Flight controls unlocked.
Radio switches.
Radio switches are off.
Landing gear switch.
Is in neutral.
Fuel firewall shutoff.
Is closed.
All ganged open. Ignition master switch.
On.
Mag switches.
Off.
Valve flaps.
They're open on my side.
Open right. Mixtures.
All right, idle cutoff.
Turbos.
Set to 0.
And the propellers.
Full
high.
increase.
Full high. Very good. Okay, ready to start.
Ready to start.
Steel barometric pressure.
Is 29 inches.
Battery switches.
Are on.
Generator switches.
Are on.
And inverter.
You want to leave the inverter checked and off.
Okay. Fuel boost pumps.
On.
On number 3.
Okay.
Okay, now we'll need 9 blades, mag on, and prime is required.
Roger.
I'll get the mixtures.
Okay. Are we clear?
Clear 3.
Okay.
Okay.
You want me to handle the mags? Was that easier?
Yeah, fine. You probably can reach them easier. I'll do
Okay.
the mixtures and the throttles.
Okay. Here we go. Clear.
6, 7, 8, 9, go.
And we got oil pressure on the nacelle.
Okay, we're ready for.
Clear it
9
back on
blades.
4.
And oil pressure's up.
Okay. Clear on 2. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mags on. And priming.
Okay. And that's a better start.
Now oil pressure's coming up.
Okay.
Okay, number 2 boost off, 1 is on.
Okay. Here we go. Mags on.
Mags on.
And oil pressure's up.
Very good. Ready to taxi.
Okay, ready to
Cover your brakes.
Okay. One thing I've noticed about taxiing this airplane is it really is delightful to taxi. It's large, but there's an awful lot of authority in the throttles to turn the airplane because the engines are mounted so far out of the wing, the 1 and 4 engine. And of course it's a swiveling tail wheel. It does not steer. And I think most people are unaware that a World War II airplane does not have a steerable tail wheel. It's all done by differential brake and power. Did you find that difficult the first time you got in it?
It was very difficult. It tended to be all over the taxiway because the lead with the power is so far. It's a while before you feel anything because of the inertia and the weight. And so about the time you get the power up, you've gone too far and you're going the other way. So it's a kind of a zigzag down the taxiway.
Interesting thing about the B-17 is it had the lowest wartime accident rate of any wartime aircraft, all of them. Trainers, bombers, fighters, transports, even the DC-3. The B-17 had the lowest accident rate, which is reflected in its warm-hearted characteristics toward the pilot. Okay, let's do the run-up checklist.
Okay, well, it's RPM's up to 1,600.
Ready on number 1?
Ammeter's good.
And I got a drop. There it is. Ready on number 2?
Ammeter's good.
And we have a drop. Ready on number 3?
Ammeter's good.
And we have a drop. Ready on number 4?
Good on the ammeter.
And we have a drop on number 4.
Okay, tailwheel on your command. Traffic looks good.
Okay. Okay, are we ready?
You got it. Looking good, looking good. All the gauges are good. Okay. Okay, I got the power right in there. Oh, that's good. Okay. Number 2's getting up there good and high. Okay, gear up. Gear coming up, brakes. 1, 2, and 3. Got 120 flaps up. Okay, 120 flaps coming up. Turbo reduction. Airspeed looks good, gauges are good.
Then the flak hit us. They didn't start out with wild shots and working closer. The first salvo they sent up was right on us. We could hear the metal of the plane bend and tear as each volley exploded. The hits weren't direct. They were just far enough away so that they didn't take off a wing or blow the plane up, but they would just tear a ship half apart without completely knocking it out. Big, ragged holes appeared in the wings and fuselage. The co-pilot was watching nothing but instruments, waiting for that telltale story on some instrument that would indicate a damaged or ruined engine. But they kept up their steady roar, even as the ship rocked from the nearness of the hundreds of flak bursts.
The 17 could take a good amount of flak damage and still fly, even with major portions of the belly blown away and the tail and everything else. Since all the control cables run through the top of the fuselage, with the sole exception of the tail wheel lock, this was the genius of Boeing's capability in building the airplane. They thought about combat when they built it. Though the wheels don't fully retract, they were ideal for belly landing, something the Ford mastered as no other aircraft with its broad, flat undersurface wings. And if the electrical system failed, the gear and flaps could be cranked down by hand. Again, it was an airplane built with combat in mind. As one would expect for a bomber, the B-17 is rock stable, so much so that once the controls are set, it takes a great deal of muscle to maneuver it around. Most of us who fly it today have found that the control stick pressures are extreme when you're trying to maneuver or stay in formation. Particularly with speed built up in a dive, it was a real challenge to master. At least it was for us who are 40 years old. Now maybe for 18-year-old kids it probably was a breeze, but that's why 18-year-old kids fly these airplanes. Now that stiffness on the controls made it a wonderful airplane for formation work if you were in smooth air. But it was work if it was rough air, and it was terrifying if it was combat. You had fighters and flak to deal with, and quite often guys were hanging on in formation for all they were worth while getting chopped apart. Yet the tight, mutually defensive box formations flown in World War II were crucial for the gunners to get, let's say, 10 to 15 50 caliber machine guns grouped from an airplane or set of airplanes onto one. Once the forts crossed into enemy territory, there was a great deal more to worry about than flying the airplane with the nature of combat the way it is. So flying the airplane had to be instinctive, and then combat capability took over from there as far as gunners and flying and everything else. People out there were trying to kill you.
Somewhere over France, one of the crew asked, "Has anyone seen our escort lately?" Suddenly, it was obvious that no one had. The chatter stopped. You could feel the tension rise. It wasn't long before there appeared ahead of us what looked like a swarm of bees, fighters several miles off but coming at us, dozens of them. It became obvious in a few seconds that we were their target as they came straight at us. It apparently didn't bother them that our greatest firepower was straight ahead. In an instant, they went right through us. In that instant, 8 of 9 planes in the high squadron were gone. The group lead aircraft had a 6-foot gap in its vertical stabilizer. As pilot, you don't see much. You're busy keeping your aircraft in position, but a glance through the overhead window told me the high squadron was gone. On our right wing was a crew from our barracks. Their entire wing was on fire. Then, There was nothing there. By the end of the third attack, we were all alone. One aircraft from an entire group? It couldn't be, yet there we were.
Fighters, 11 o'clock high.
Top turret.
I wonder what's going through the minds of those German pilots. If they're half as scared as us, we must be doing something right.
Right ahead of us is a formation consisting of about 250 fortresses. I myself remain behind the enemy formation and pick off as my target a lone fortress. At a range of 500 feet, I open fire in short bursts. The American defenses reply. The tracers come whizzing all around me, uncomfortably near my head. The usual pearl necklace has become thicker and thicker, and once again there's altogether too much of this blasted metal in the air. Suddenly, my Messerschmitt 109 is literally caught in a hail of fire. There's a smell of burning cordite. Boom! My fuselage is hit. My own shooting takes effect. But this time the Yankee plane is in flames, swerving off to the left as it drops away. 4 parachutes mushroom open. Suddenly my aircraft is hit several times in succession and badly shaken. It sounds like a sack of potatoes being emptied over a barrel in which I'm sitting. Flames come belching out at me from the engine, and the smoke is choking me, and my eyes water. So they have me now, after all. It is a shambles.
The horrifying sights that B-17 crews witnessed became commonplace. Death became a consistent companion when the average life of the 8th Air Force bomber crew was around 12 to 15 missions. The required minimum tour was 25 and then later 35 missions. So it didn't take a math genius to figure out that your odds of survival were low.
A shining silver rectangle of metal sailed past over our right wing. I recognized it as the main exit door. Seconds later, a black lump came hurtling through the formation, barely missing several propellers. It was a man, clasping his knees to his head, revolving like a diver in a triple somersault, shooting by us so close that I saw a piece of paper blow out of his leather jacket. He was evidently making a delayed jump, for I didn't see his parachute open. The B-17 turned gradually out of formation to the left, maintaining altitude. In a split second, it completely vanished in a brilliant explosion from which the only remains were 4 balls of fire, the fuel tanks, which were quickly consumed as they fell earthward.
Bombs away. Let's get out of here.
Quite often when we were aboard the B-17 going back into Geneseo, I drift back in my mind to try and grasp what it must have been like to come home after a mission, after facing such mind-jarring horror. After a while, I have to come to grips with the realization that only those who were there can appreciate what they were called upon to do.
As we circled the field after getting home, we could see a lot of empty spaces, and we knew we were at least one of the few. We landed, and when we taxied to our space, we found our squadron commander waiting for us. He was crying. We were stunned to learn that we were the only aircraft to return to the field, and only one of 4 to make it back to England out of the original group of 20 aircraft. Of the 8th Air Force aircraft lost over Germany that day, we had lost almost 25% of them. What do you say? What do you do when your squadron commander is crying and wants to know what happened? You do the same thing he's doing.
Well, that magic day, the end of a combat tour finally arrived. The agony of combat was forgotten, and these young men turned back into boys, beating up the airfield celebration of survival. No one who was on a base and witnessed a low-level buzz job can ever forget it. It was a tremendous experience and one that is made famous in movies and elsewhere. But the B-17 was the master of the buzz job because it was so stable and so safe and so able to really beat the ground up for its size.
Returning over our base, we buzzed the field and shot off 2 boxes of flares, about 200 rounds, to celebrate the completion of our combat tour. Our tail gunner was firing a pistol out of the waist window and lobbed one right into the control tower. We all got a big kick watching the brass scramble. Our pilot, Lieutenant Thompson, put on a real show for us, swabbing the field back and forth. What happy warriors we were in the B-17 that afternoon. We landed after 9 hours aloft. I thought for sure we would never see England again, since I had never expected to get back.
Kind of an amazing thing, really, that an airplane this big is so straightforward to fly. It absolutely seems to be viceless. And I know most of your museum pilots have gone through it and really do enjoy flying it. The thing is, the airplane seems to know how to fly.
Exactly.
And if you don't interfere with it a lot, it does just a fine job.
It knows how to do it fine if you just leave it alone.
It really does.
Okay, free landing check.
Roger.
Is hydraulic pressure and switch auto.
Okay. Check.
Boost pumps coming on. And mixtures to auto rich. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And gear down when you're ready.
Okay, gear down.
Cowl flaps are set and locked, and we'll bring the RPMs up to 2,300.
Okay.
Turbo's going to 6.
Okay.
And flaps as required.
Okay.
Landing check done.
The great thing about landing this airplane, Austin, is it's the same as it is when you take off. You hold a certain attitude and it settles right on down.
Sure does.
That's the amazing thing, that the attitudes for landing, takeoff, and everything else is about the same. Okay, let's go full flap.
Full flap. It's an amazing airplane. I've seen guys that have been sitting in this seat while guys put it down. There's 7 or 10 degrees crab, and it just kind of straightens itself out.
Well, it does. You know, you don't panic heavily when you're in a crab like this. This airplane just straightens out when it touches down.
Just kind of grunts.
Amazing machine. We're looking good.
Okay.
There we go, 110. We feel read the speeds off to
110, 112, 112, 112. Looking good. 110, 110, 110, 110, 105, 105. They wipe the power right around 100. Power's coming off. You got it. Looks beautiful. Ha 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 ha.
Nice job.
See why people love this airplane.
I do. It's a wonderful airplane.
It goes where you point it.
Well, and it doesn't want to go if you don't point it.
Yeah.
It's so big that if you argue with it, you've got to sort of set it up. You know, one of the things that any good instructor teaches is a good approach makes a good landing. And if you make a bad approach, genuinely you get a bad landing. And that's how this airplane is. Another thing about this airplane is inertia. Just a little bit of power and this thing will genuinely get going on the ground as far as taxiing. You really got to be careful that it doesn't gain too much speed. Post-landing checklist, you can read through all that off and make sure we've got it.
Okay, hydraulic pressure is checked. Cowl flaps, I'm not going to play with it. You get fully stopped.
Okay. Tail wheels unlocked.
And propellers are full high. Boost pumps coming off. Turbos to 0. Flaps are up. Tail wheels required. Excess radios. And the inverter can go off if you can reach it.
Roger. Inverter's off.
Strobe and beacon will leave on as long as we're on the runway, I guess. And again, the pump switch is auto. And landing gear switch to neutral.
Neutral, and you can lock the tail wheel.
There stood all our buddies. Ground crew, and even the brass were there to congratulate us on our tour completion. As we came tumbling out of our ship, we were greeted with laughter, tears, hugs, backslapping, silent prayers. In the wee hours of the morning, our gallant crew crawled in loose formation, leaving strange contrails across some muddy plowed fields from the combat club to our Nissen hut. Our tour completed, the only thing left was the hangover.